working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day bigger your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin.
Hail Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire grinding system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Hello and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong Live, the show that helps you cut through the noise and make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff. With me is Jay McKenzie and special guest, author and activist Jared Yates Sexton. I know I say this every week, folks, but it's been a week. Things are so crazy right now. And I think we're all having a hard time keeping up. So if you were thinking it was just you, nope. And I think a lot of people are getting really confused about everything because the fire hose is just so wide open right now. They're doing everything they possibly can to make this just overwhelm people, really.
Yeah, and I think that is both to our detriment, but also our benefit. You know, because on one hand, like, it's an absolute onslaught that's supposed to make us feel like there's no pushing back against it or actually defeating it. But at the same time, it's so fucking blatant that there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. And I think we're very, very lucky that these assholes can't help but do it this way.
Yeah, they absolutely just don't seem to be able to. And, you know, no matter how many times you think maybe they're going to take a step back, they're going to realize just how pissed off people are at this point. They don't. They just keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, shit, I live in a northern suburb of Seattle and they got fucking protests at the Tesla dealership out here.
Are the cops out there yet?
Mm-hmm. The cops have come out.
Okay.
Yeah,
you gotta protect private property. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, 4 of them got trashed the other day. Somebody spray painted swastikas on them.
Yeah, I always feel a little weird about these. Like, on one hand, like the consumer boycott of Tesla, I think, is like actually very inspiring. On the other hand, just between me, you, and everybody listening, I always find it a little weird when the shootings and the arson happens. I always feel a little, and by that I mean, I don't know who's doing it, but I also know that there are a bunch of accelerationists who have a reason to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, for all we know, Elon's paying someone to have it done. You know, until they actually charge somebody and come up with some good evidence and convict them, I see no reason to believe it's anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, you're a domestic terrorist if you push back against Tesla at this point. It's weird how the law works.
Yeah, but he's also, I love that argument while they're simultaneously arguing that he's not a political figure. He's never been one. He doesn't want that. But like, by definition, it cannot be domestic terrorism unless he is a political figure.
He's Schrodinger's oligarch. He's both in charge of Doge. He's not in charge of Doge. He has all the power in the world. Hey, don't worry. The people in the room are pushing back against him. He doesn't have all that much power. It's wild how this works.
Yeah.
Reminiscent of Trump 1, where like we were always being told how, oh yeah, this person or that person's going to make sure it doesn't get too bad. Don't worry. It's fine. They'll keep him under control.
The adults in the room.
The adults in the room. And take a look back and it's like, boy, that didn't age well. None of that aged well. There apparently weren't. We got lied to. So.
Yeah, you hate it when the adults aren't adults. You know, when you have it's actually funny thinking about it. It follows the exact same trajectory of like what it is to grow up, which is the moment when you suddenly realize that your parents don't actually have their shit together.
Yeah.
You know, and meanwhile we have like an entire like generation and political and media class that still hasn't come to realize that daddy and mommy don't have their shit together.
Nope. Daddy and mommy are out partying. And that's how it's going to be. They haven't come home. They're not coming home. You better figure this out. But no. Eventually the adults in the room will show up, really. We promise.
Yeah, don't worry. The white hats are on it. You know, I'm still waiting on the Robert Mueller report. I assume at some point it'll be released unredacted. James Comey is on this shit. We're ready.
Absolutely.
Oh, staring at it his cornfield or whatever the hell it was.
You know, all these people have cashed in on their book tours and they're all off in like fucking Aruba or someplace. You know, they're done. They made
I love to think that they still think another book is coming. You know, like where James Comey will release one more book.
And
And
that'll do
meanwhile,
it.
nobody's answering the calls.
It's like, well, and I love being those people that think that like it's going to take one more book, one more news article, one more like expose on these people, and that's it. Everybody's going to all of a sudden wake up and realize, oh yeah, Trump's horrible. Let's get him out, and it'll happen. It's
I
like,
miss those days. I
fuck
miss
me.
I mean,
thinking that.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Back when you
Yeah.
know we were just wee children at this kind of stuff, and
The
realized that,
feeling of Paul Manafort getting indicted and thinking, "Oh my God, something is happening. This is something. This is good."
I have
Like,
to do a mea culpa here. I was the guy who did the "he just tweeted it out" tweet. And like I literally, the moment that happened, I was just like, oh man, this is done. And I gotta tell you,
Yeah.
there's a lot more gray in my beard than there was in 2016.
fuck.
Because you
Yeah.
have to grow up.
uh-huh.
You
Yeah.
have to grow up and recognize what's actually happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's happening is like we are very much on our own at this point. There just isn't anyone that's going to be able to do anything to stop this besides us. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to take at this point. What
Well-
form that looks like.
Well, thanks for
But
inviting me, guys. I
definitely.
appreciate this conversation. This felt great. No, I mean, but that's the truth. I mean, like
Yeah.
when you suddenly realize it's like, you know, I don't know if your listeners or if you guys have ever had this feeling, but there are moments where you're at a bar or a party or some sort of a place where a situation arises, right? And it starts getting very tense, and it actually starts getting very dangerous, and you're looking left, you're looking right, and you're like, who's going to take care of this? And you suddenly realize that like unconsciously you just volunteered yourself.
Mhm.
You know, and that's what this is. And there is a measure, I think it's overwhelming, but at the same time there is a clarity of that agency, which
Yeah.
is, oh yeah, okay, we are going to have to do something about this, and it is going to be hard, but that feels a lot better than, again, waiting on the Robert Mueller report to be released.
Yeah, because I mean that
Yeah.
was so seductive. The idea that like somehow there would be a report that everybody would take action on, and that all we really had to do was sit back and wait for it. And I think a lot of people, you know, including myself, thought to some extent that was how it was going to go. But then you realize that no, they got out ahead of that. They had Matt Taibbi release a hit piece, and then they had Bill Barr
Yeah.
fucking send out a 4-page memo saying none of this is true. And next thing you know, we're fucked.
Yeah,
Just like
because
what
they-
Mueller would have said.
Have
Yeah.
either of you guys seen 0 Day, the Netflix limited series?
I don't think I
Mm.
have.
No.
Okay,
haven't.
so real fast, I totally recommend it. It's the most entertaining slop that you could ever imagine. It's like walking into a liberal fever dream that is like 10 years too late. You know what I mean? And they're like at the end of the series, not to spoil it, the investigator, the former president, he blows it wide open by delivering his report. Right? Like he's crossed all the T's and the I's. Don't worry about the fact that he trampled on people's constitutional rights and also like black-sided a Tucker Carlson type figure, right? But they still are so desperate. Like, I don't know if you pay attention to it, but it's like you look on social media, it's a bunch of rule sticklers. It's like, no, actually the Taft-Hartley Act says that you can't do this. Or oh, thank God for this district county judge. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, like these things are make believe. They're not real.
Mhm.
One
Yeah.
Hatch Act violation after another. I can't believe he keeps doing that. It's like, yeah, I can't believe it. You know, just shocked that he keeps doing this and somehow keeps getting away with it. It's amazing. It's almost like these rules don't actually really exist unless people kind of everybody decides to follow them to an extent. And when one side doesn't, you're kind of fucked. Just kind of fucked. It's-
Yeah, I read the Thomas Zimmer piece today where he was talking about the Foreign Affairs article that came out in January, essentially talking about how bad it is going to get and how I think the term they used was competitive authoritarianism, and that's where we're headed, which is true. And he talked about in the piece, and he wasn't trying to bash the authors, but just saying like they were right about where we're going, and the Hungary style model is what we're approaching, but they didn't think it would happen this fast because almost no one thought it would happen this fast. And I've
Yeah.
been sitting with that today and thinking like these are very smart people and they're right. They know what they're talking about. Almost everyone thought that, yeah, it's going to take them months and years to really get to where we already are right now. And the only thing that I can think to explain why I think Griff and I and you and people like us knew it would be faster is because we actually listen to these assholes.
Yeah.
Because I listen to Charlie Kirk. I read the tweets by all the right-wing shitheads and know that they can justify absolutely anything, and they will, and they have. And so it doesn't matter how bad it is. There is a point where this stops working, where things get bad enough that something will give, something will change. But I don't think that's a given that it happens next week or 5 years from now. I mean, it might be complete and total collapse when we get there. It will happen eventually, but there is no red line. There are no red lines. We're
Right.
way past that world.
Well, for me, it was growing up in a dysfunctional household and the hypervigilance that came around, right? It was looking for signals and connections. And Jay, what you just brought up, I think, is essentially important, which is we actually listened to the people who were behind the power the entire time. And for years, it was hysterical to say, hey, here's Alexander Dugin out here on the periphery. And I think there's a real possibility that Vladimir Putin is going to destroy the American order and possibly invade Ukraine, right? To try and bring about some sort of an authoritarian thing. And then it was like, oh, hey, by the way, not only is Hungary doing this, but they're having Viktor Orban over in order to tutor them to do this.
Yep.
They didn't hide any of it.
No.
They documented everything. Yeah, it was on CPAC. It was on every podcast. It was on every single newsletter and article that any of these assholes wrote.
Mhm.
And the problem here is that the people who should have been paying attention to this, and over the past year and a half, like I've had conversations with like Democratic Party strategists and these people on the inside of this apparatus. And they're just like, can you tell me about this Curtis Yarvin guy? And it's like, do you know how much money you make that you should have had this on your radar? Like this guy had all of the funding in the world. Peter Thiel has not been at all bashful about what he wanted to create. And now we're in 2025, and suddenly we're talking. What was the euphemism? Freedom cities,
Yeah.
right? Like
yes.
these little corporate towns that basically would supersede the nation state. And it's like, no, they were talking about this from 2015 on.
Yes.
And you start looking at everything that Doge is doing, and it's like these are the wet dreams of people who couldn't even be bothered to have these conversations behind closed doors.
Nope.
They were on the worst lit podcast that you have ever watched in your entire life that were also selling dick pills. You know, and so like the problem here is that the people who have had a vested interest in actually paying attention to this have been the people outside of the power base.
Yeah.
And the power base at this point is 8 to 9 years behind the curve. And they're trying desperately to pick up speed, but at the same time, they have every financial incentive not to. And to just look around and be like, what the hell is going on? There's supposed to be a rule. Doesn't the parliamentarian have something to say about this, right?
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's a bunch of people who've been screaming their heads off for years saying, this is your job.
Yeah.
This was your entire vocation, and you've made 6 figures a year and been in every room with power that entire time. And how dare you at this point even like show up to work with your lanyards?
It's like, what did you say to these people when you had their ear? You could have probably stopped at least some of this stuff.
But not rock the boat. That's what they did.
What did you
not
say?
rock the boat.
Yeah.
I mean, the money wants to
for the most part, when I have these conversations, and, you know, in the past, like, it was very much trying to tutor, you know, the most unwilling student that you have ever come across in your entire life. Because honestly, talking about what the tech oligarchs have planned, it sounds fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking nuts. You know what I mean? Like, literally, it's the most insane thing ever, but it's the ideology that forwards this. And now, I don't know how you feel. I have a sense of clarity at this moment about what's going on and what needs to happen, but I am so incredibly pissed off. I am just fucking infuriated that the people who should have handled this have been asleep at the wheel And some of them have collaborated with it. They've capitulated with it. And now it's white hot rage that could actually power one of these freedom cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that, especially if you were in a position where you could have done something. It's one thing, like if you're a civilian and you couldn't get your head around this, I totally understand that, because it is movie villain shit what these people want to do. The whole Freedom Cities plan. I mean, like, which Bond villain was that actually
I
did
don't
that at
expect
one
people to
point?
have an understanding of Carl Schmitt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that is like specialized knowledge. I get
Right.
it, but
But at some
Yeah.
point, you should be able to point it out and say, this was the Nazis' favorite legal scholar. This guy was like a giant of literal fucking Nazi jurisprudence, and that's who they're citing. Does that tell you something about where they're coming from here?
listen, I had to study Martin Heidegger for years to wrap my head around the philosophy of Heidegger. You know what I mean? In order to understand exactly what the war against liberalism was. I don't expect normal people to get off their jobs where they're being absolutely exploited, where they have to choose between groceries and cutting their pills in half. And by the way, thinking about taking like pet medicine in order to treat themselves. They don't have the training, they don't have the time, they don't have the skills, and quite frankly, they shouldn't be expected to do that. But these lanyard twirlers in Washington, D.C., that should have been on the guard for this. And for the record, the media people who were suddenly like, Curtis Yarvin, that's fascinating. Well, let's have a Sunday conversation.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
those people shouldn't be able to go outside. Those people shouldn't be able to get a dinner in public without having people chase them yelling shame at them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's a shame. We don't do more of that in this country. And we really absolutely should, for these people that absolutely just missed the boat. They missed it. They had the chance. They could have done some of this. The material was out there. I mean, we found what we needed to read. We found what we needed to listen to. We were able to pick this all up. We've known who these guys were for years. They weren't, like you said, they weren't subtle. They weren't even kind of hiding what they were trying to do. I mean, Freedom Cities, shit, they built one in Honduras. It's already running. They have one of these things. And they're doing unlicensed medical experiments down there because they don't have a government to tell them not to do it at this point. The government of Honduras is totally on board with this. But people still can't look at it and say, this is the model.
They just the people in DC you're talking about spent so long saying this is all just politics. Oh, they're just placating these people. Oh, they're just telling them they don't believe this QAnon stuff. None of those people have any influence. They know it's crazy. They don't want to denounce it because they're going to vote for him and he needs the support, but it's just politics. That's not real. That's not going to become real life. And then it just seeped in more and more and more until it completely consumed what was left of the decency of the Republican Party. And that, now it is politics. Now it is, I mean, these right-wing shit posters, libs of TikTok, Mike Cernovich, the alt-right was once this little fringe weirdo group at the Deplorable, right? And now they're behind several executive orders. It's
Jack Posobiec goes on trips with the defense secretary.
Yeah.
And to be a fly on that wall, I just want to say very quickly what we're actually talking about, and I think to bring it into a larger context, it's a lack of imagination is what it is. Like the people who have been responsible within the Democratic Party, within the liberal establishment, and this is how it always works. This is how authoritarianism always takes root and then expands itself. It takes advantage of a group of people that could never imagine something different. That it would just be one election cycle after another of Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney. Every single cycle from now until eternity. Thank you, Francis Fukuyama. We have reached the end of history.
It's the end of history.
We're simply and for the record, it's not just seeing the threats that were emerging and announcing themselves. It's also failing to see a better way to live, which is one of the reasons why the Democratic Party has reached this existential crossroads. Yeah. They haven't offered anything new. They haven't offered anything that is actually going to better anyone's lives outside of means-tested programs that you couldn't explain to the people who need them in the first place. So we don't have any projects that were able to sort of reinvigorate any national pride, any interconnectedness. And as a result, they became not just conservative, but they became extremely conservative, where the only thing that the Democratic Party can offer is, yeah, Pac-Man's over here absolutely eating every pellet on the board. We promise we will stop him before he gets to the last one and we go to the next level. And that is the nature of the Democratic Party. They have nothing to offer at this point outside of, well, we might be able to keep a couple of civil liberties. Thanks. See you at the polls.
I think this continuing resolution that just passed is really just the best example of how bankrupt this shit just is, because this was not a hard call. This was absolutely not a tough decision for them to make. And yet somehow we get to see a little bit behind the curtain with Chuck Schumer, you know, explaining how this is going to go down. And then it goes down. They have just enough votes to stop it. Just enough. Weird how that always happens. Just enough votes.
They just found the right amount.
Weird. It's always just that many. And then, okay, we're done. We're out. I got a book tour next week, guys. We can't have a protracted fight over this. Oh, wait, no, I don't have a book tour. I'm canceling my book tour, because he understands, at least this much, that people are really angry right now. And then maybe a book tour isn't the best idea when people are this pissed off at you. Going out in public and giving them a chance to offer feedback on your most recent performance. That might not.
And then he's like a Republican not holding a town hall. It's the exact same thing. It's sad. And of course they go to the threats, and well, I'm sure there are always threats. And yes, no one wants anything to happen to Chuck Schumer other than resign and go away. They just needed an ounce of courage, and they're so afraid of getting blamed for it, of upsetting the donors, of appearing like they're the extreme party. They're still worried that they're going to get labeled extremist and everyone is going to shy away. And I think the strategy, as much as there is one, is just to let it all burn down, look like the normal, sane, rational party that can get all the money. But how do they not remember that they had plenty of money last time and the message just sucked? They had enough money. The message was awful.
They had over $1 billion.
$1 billion American dollars. So real fast, just a couple of quick points, because you absolutely nailed it. First things first, the main priority of the Democratic Party right now is trying to keep their billionaire and corporate donors who are either uninterested in donating to them right now because they don't get results, or they've already moved over to Donald Trump. That is their main focus. They don't care about the base, even though, I don't know if y'all saw it, the NBC News poll that said that the Democratic Party has a 27% approval rating. Measles has a 27% approval rating. But when you actually take a look at all of this, the incredible thing, I don't know if y'all saw this New York Times interview with Chuck Schumer. The most Chuck Schumer thing of all time, which is capitulating with the Republican Party and then going and doing an interview with the New York Times. And I am a collector of grotesqueries. And this interview was beautiful because he gave a snapshot of a man who, by the way, his political understanding has never moved past 1997. That is where he still exists. He still believes the Republican Party is going to wake up from their fever dream and work along with them, even though those Republicans have been absolutely hunted down like Neanderthal at this point. Then on top of it, and for the record, he has the temerity to not even stand up for Mahmoud Khalil, his constituent.
Right.
But then while he's doing this, what he makes clear is that this is a man who is in the perfect position to be a historical capitulator. He is the exact type of leader that has nothing to offer beyond what is the responsibility of the Democratic Party right now. It is to be the custodian of the status quo. The Democratic Party has recognized their role, which is when they're in power, there's not enough money to do anything. Oh my God, we would love to help you all, but man, the money's just not there. Then when the Republican Party crashes the economy, the Democrats sweep in, bail out, make all of the corporate shareholders whole, and then there's no money.
Right.
We don't have anything to do. And so and I don't know if you all feel like Schumer is going to go. I don't think that the tides of history are going to sweep him out, because he does exactly what a Democratic leader should do, which is bundle fundraising from corporate billionaires, and that's it. And then say, what are we supposed to do? We were in a bad bind. And that's it. No negotiation, no deals whatsoever with the Republican Party. He got nothing for what happened, because that's what the party does. It makes sure that bill gets passed, and then they say, we wish we could have done better, and that's it.
Yeah. And I want to roll back to something you said about programs and means testing. That's kind of funny you brought that up, because that's their excuse for not spending the money when they come in. You know, they've got it for the billionaires, they've got it for the corporations, but then we have to make sure that nobody who doesn't need these programs could possibly get them, or else the Republicans might say mean things about us. So we have to pass these means tested programs. It's like, you can't even give these people a crumb. You have nothing to offer at this point. And it's really just the most jarring feeling to some extent of realizing that you and us and a lot of other people are just absolutely, it's time to build something else. This isn't going to go much longer.
There's no other message coming out of the party. There's no competing message saying that this is, I mean, there's AOC basically, and she's barely still in the party as far as they're concerned. And there's just nothing coming out that's saying, oh no, Chuck Schumer was wrong and bad and he has to go. And it's John Fetterman, who's essentially, you know, the new Joe Manchin of the Senate, saying that, well, I did vote yes on the CR, but actually I voted no. That's their argument now. Is a yes vote is a no vote because it would be worse. We don't know. I think I understand they're going with that. We have to keep the argument, at least as of today, was, well, we had to keep the government open because Musk and Trump are going to do even more to consolidate power. It's going to be even worse if we shut the government down, as if they haven't already kind of at least halfway shut it down themselves. I mean, okay, more people will be out of work, but you can't say that. And it also assumes that you know what they're going to do over the next 6 months, which you don't know. You know it's going to be bad. I mean, the only way to really create any friction here is to tell them to fuck off, and they won't. You're right, because that's a risk, and they will not take a risk.
And I would postulate that these people are historically bad at knowing what Musk and Trump and the rest of them are going to do. Their track record for being able to predict what Trump is going to do.
They created Elon Musk.
Terrible.
Yeah.
They created Elon Musk.
So let's not hear these lectures about, oh, well, we know what they're going to do, because no, you don't. You haven't proven that you know what they're going to do at any point in all of this. So maybe you should listen to the people who have a better track record of predicting this. Just saying.
I will say a glimmer of hope in this, first of all, is I am seeing more people seeing through the bullshit of the Democratic Party. Like, not just the 27% that I mentioned earlier, but just anecdotal evidence of people saying, why don't you do something? And you're so close if you're asking that. You're so close to asking the question, why don't you do something? Right? And I want to point out, I brought up the donors a second ago, and you'd brought up that there was $1 billion+ for Kamala Harris. There was a ton of corporate donations. There was a ton of billionaire donations. Those primarily go to operate the Democratic Party. And for the record, the strategists and all those people in these campaigns, when they're not on a campaign, they're working for those corporations. So what it is a support system for the people around the power core of the Democratic Party. You know what's exciting about that? The rest of the money that makes up that $1 billion, small donations from the base that is being completely and utterly forgotten and misrepresented. So here is the question at this point. We have a large part of the electorate, I would say the vast majority of the electorate, that doesn't like the Democratic Party, that doesn't approve of Donald Trump. You start adding in people who have not been involved in the political process and who have been turned off by it. You also have an obscene amount of money that the Democratic Party might not be possibly given anymore. You start having alternatives. Yeah. And that is the question is, will the Democratic Party go the way of the Whigs? And for anybody who knows anything about history, why did the Whigs go away? Because they refused to fucking fight the Confederates. They refused to fight the slaveholders. And you know what they did? They went out and they found a new fucking party that was willing to stand up in the halls of Congress. So there is a question at this point, which is, there is a point where something new could be birthed. And I don't know about you, but I don't see the Democratic Party recognizing that or particularly caring about that.
Well, you know what? I listened to your podcast as well because it's fantastic, and I know I've heard you argue this and talk about this, and I have sat with it a little bit and thought, 6 months ago, 5 years ago, any point in my life that I can remember, that would seem impossible. And everyone would have said there's no way you are going to have a third party. And anyone who brings up the Whigs just doesn't understand that's not how it works anymore. And you're right. The fact that the Democrats think that still means that it could. If they thought there was any real possibility that something could change, they might actually do something, but they don't. And that's where we come in. That's where we have a voice. That's where we get a say. And I think you're right. I agree that I don't think the Democrats are going to do anything. And I think it is going to be up to us to, not just vote them out, but find a better way, a different way, something else. Right. And I don't know what that looks like. But man, I'm hopeful. I am hopeful.
I think to some extent it looks like AOC. I think it looks like younger generation of politicians that is not prepared to sit still for this bullshit. They came up in a different way. They're not beholden to some of the same special interests that, a Chuck Schumer is. And they understand that what the people kind of want to see is something different. They want to see a fight. They want to see pushback. And they're not going to get that with this existing generation of politicians. AOC did something real interesting after the election. She did an Instagram live where she asked people who voted for her and Trump on the same ticket, why? What was the logic behind this? What were you thinking? And so many of these people's answer was, I wanted change. I wanted change. I wanted authenticity. I wanted change. People who really felt like they were about change, and both you are. And it's kind of like the Democrats are not hearing this. They have not heard this for generations, that people want something different here. They want to see pushback. This goes back as far as I can remember, that anybody who has pushed back on this, even, in the middle of a very unpopular Gulf War, the people that stood up and said, hey, this is bullshit, got marginalized. They had to be just for it enough that they wouldn't be afraid of being tarred and feathered as unpatriotic, but those people got marginalized and pushed to the sides because they were afraid of what the Republicans would do to them in the general election if those people got in. So I find myself really thinking that, how much longer are these people going to get away with not hearing what their constituents want before it all falls apart on them?
Well, and I want to say, when we talk about Donald Trump and MAGA, is it a white supremacist cult? Absolutely it is. Is it an authoritarian cult? Absolutely it is. Is there nativism? Is there patriarchal misogyny? Absolutely. But you don't form a movement like MAGA without there being a need for something like MAGA, right? Personally, you know what I hate? I hate the taste of mango. I really, really hate the taste of mango. But if I had just crawled through the desert without a drink of water, and someone was offering me a fistful of sand, and someone was offering me a mango flavored water, I might take the mango flavored water, know?
Yes.
And so what actually happened with the MAGA movement, it's a faux populist movement. At the core of the offer that he made, there was a truth. And this is the ugliness of right-wing authoritarianism. There's always a truth at the core of it. It's, built out on lies. But the truth is this. They said, you've been screwed. And they were right. We have been screwed. They said you were betrayed. We have been betrayed. We were actually betrayed by neoliberal globalism, which, by the way, was created by the same wealth class that has powered MAGA. And they said, you've been betrayed by black people, you've been betrayed by immigrants, by women, by gay and trans people, right? They always change who's responsible for it. But at the core, there are tens of millions of Americans who have been written off that literally just want something different.
Yeah.
And they aren't being offered that by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has played good cop in all of this, which is, oh, the institutions are actually good and America is actually great. And hey, I know you feel like the economy's bad, but look at these numbers that we absolutely cook to the gills.
Yeah.
Right? People
Yeah.
have been looking for an alternative. And when authoritarianism, right-wing authoritarianism takes over, it's because people are looking for a change and there are not alternatives. Mostly because the left has been completely deplatformed and destroyed. And that has been a cycle we've seen take over. And when you actually look at the numbers, people say we're a divided country. Yes, we are culturally. On the issues, we are not divided. The vast consensus in this country is behind left-wing programs and social safety nets and left-wing funding. And that has not been spoke to outside of this faux populist movement that's been created by the wealth class and MAGA.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not really in any of their interest at this point to have that conversation. They don't want to do that. They would rather keep people, pointed at each other, getting mad at those people over there. Those are the trans people. They're the reason why you can't get a job. It's not Trump took egg. It's trans people took egg. Yeah, it's just ridiculous how freaking
it's not the
stupid this is.
people explicitly funding this that are you're voting. I understand. I mean, it's such a weird conundrum. So I live in Tennessee, and just being around these people and understanding, why a lot of them voted for Trump, and knowing that he's going to make your life worse, and wanting to tell them, like, he's going to make your life worse. And a lot of them, they know it, but they just are tired of Democrats telling them, just wait a little longer. It'll get a little bit better. If you just hold on, it'll get a little bit better, and then a little bit better. And they don't want to hear that, and they're angry, and Trump is at least a wrecking ball.
Do you know why people commit crimes? There are some people who really enjoy committing crimes. You know what I mean? Like they get a thrill from it. The majority of people who commit crimes because they're desperate, because they don't have a lot of different choices. They don't think about the consequences of those things. They know that there's a desperation or a need there, and they're willing to do whatever it is to possibly change their circumstances. And at that point, does liberal democracy work right now? No, it does not. I have these interviews all the time, guys, where people are like, can you believe the lack of trust in our institutions? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? They're like, oh, Donald Trump has done such a number on our trust in the judicial system. And it's like, would you be asking me about this if I was a black man? Like we understand.
Like they think it's Trump's tweets alone. Things Trump tweets have brought this upon us.
Yeah, that's the one thing.
Yeah,
if we just moved him out of the way, everything would be totally fine. And I just want to bring up one point really quickly. Right now, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, has carried out an oligarchical coup of our government. Don't you find it strange that we didn't talk about this during the election of 2024? After he bought J.D. Vance, the VP slot, after he bought control over the MAGA movement, why is it that we didn't have a conversation about that? It's the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. The richest man in the world has bought a presidential candidate, and yet the Democratic nominee never brought it up. And why is that? It's because Elon Musk became the richest man in the world because the Democratic Party fed him as much money and support as he could possibly take, as well as all of the other oligarchs during the Obama administration, because they thought they were whiz kids and were on their side. So in order to actually deal with this problem, you would have to have a party that would call balls and strikes, that would say these people got their money through the wrong means. They shouldn't have this power. They shouldn't have this wealth. It requires people. And for a Democrat to do that at this point, it takes political courage, because you would have to actually critique your party and the history of the party. The same way, Griff, you brought up the Iraq War. You have to have people who say, hey, guess what? That was a bipartisan war. That was something that members of both sides of the aisle agreed to. You have to have somebody who comes along and says, we have responsibility here. There's a reason you don't trust us, and now we need to work on it.
Right. And I mean, they got hit with that. They should know, because that was one of the attack lines that they got hit with the last couple of elections was, you people supported the Iraq War. And it was like, well, they did. It was one of the valid criticisms of Hillary Clinton was like, she was in favor of this at the time. Well, she was. Go back and look. So at some point, you got to cop to that. You got to say, hey, we've made some real serious policy mistakes and some real serious, issues that we've backed that we shouldn't have backed, we're better now. Here, we're proving it. We're actually coming up with behavioral patterns that don't look like that anymore. So until that happens, I think we're going to see the same thing over and over. We really
Well,
are.
I mean, it would have taken real courage, and Biden wasn't around to do it. But if Harris had been willing to say, talked more about Afghanistan, like they did leave. Yeah, it was a shit show. It was always going to be a shit show. You leave a war zone that Trump wanted to leave, that Trump negotiated with the Taliban to leave, but he wouldn't leave because he didn't want the mess. And we actually left. That is something different.
Or Gaza. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
they could have.
There
were opportunities here.
You know, and Griff and I talked about this at the time, and the war in Gaza was such a difficult thing to talk about, and you felt like you had to put so many caveats on it in the beginning. And I said plenty of things about, I understand Israel's position and why they feel they have a right to defend themselves and all of this. And I think there was a point when those reasonable, rational arguments went out the window. And you did have to say, this goes so far beyond a rational response, an act of defending yourself. This is genocide. This is crimes against humanity. And there was a point when they could have done that. They could have had the courage to say, this is enough, stop it. And they just wouldn't.
Nope.
Well, and I think part of that, and one of the things, and you'll notice in all of these autopsies of the 2024 election, there's one word that's always missing in all of them, and that's Gaza. Period. Yeah. And there was no ability whatsoever for that campaign to talk about it. And meanwhile, what happened with the college protesters? I'm a former university professor. Watching students get beaten and get zip-tied and having law enforcement partner with right-wing mobs to beat the shit out of them. And then meanwhile going on social media as liberals and people with like Harris, Biden in their bios cheering on those people being brutalized. And for the record, anybody now who's like, where's all the protest? You let them get the shit knocked out of them. You let those people get brutalized. That created a schism in the liberal, progressive, leftist coalition. And what we're watching now with the Trump administration, they're taking advantage of that. There's a reason why Mahmoud Khalil was the first person disappeared, because they knew that people like Chuck Schumer and other liberals were not going to stand up for a Palestinian protester. And what happened? You look around our media now, there are still articles that are talking about these protests as being out of control and needing brought to heel. And when you make that deal with the devil, when you go ahead and imbibe that poison, and this is the problem with liberalism and the problem with the Democratic Party, they've been okay with just a little bit of authoritarianism, right? Just if they're working with us, if it serves our bottom line, we're okay with it. We don't want to mess with it. When you go ahead and step over that line, you make all of this inevitable. You make this downward slope that we're on now. It means that you've invited it in and it's going to take over. And quite frankly, going back to what Griff said, if this party is going to survive, and if this party is in any way, shape, or form going to represent an actual resistance to rising authoritarianism, they have to own that. They have to have at least a public acknowledgement of the fact that they played a role in any of this and that they took the wrong route.
That's a level of self-awareness they have historically not shown.
Yes.
That's all. That's what you want to see, is them coming out and saying something like that, but that would take a different party, I think, at this point.
I wanted to say, and you brought up Mahmoud Khalil, and we saw the messages, the statements coming out from the Democrats after that, and they were so weak. They were about as watered down and weak. They had a paragraph of, exposition before they got to well, maybe this is bad. And I was talking to Griff before we got on here, and I said, 5 years ago, I would have looked him up, and I would have said, okay, who is this guy? What did he say? Like, how bad is he? Just to have, who am I defending? What am I defending here?
Yep.
And now I have not even looked, and I do not care. And that should be the stance of everyone that opposes the Trump regime is it doesn't fucking matter. He is a Hamas supporter, just as you and I could be called Hamas supporters tomorrow. It doesn't. That means whatever the hell they want it to mean.
Yeah.
And if they can do it to him and they can get away with it, we're next.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what does it look like? It looks like every cop killing in this country of a black man, which is the moment that they get killed, they go on, they say, well, he's no angel. Look at this crime he committed. Look at how this happened. Meanwhile, there has been this core of privilege, particularly among white centrist liberals, that are just like, oh, some bad things happen. I really wish things could get fixed, right? With this situation with Khalil, I'm with you. It was instantaneous. I don't give a shit if he was running up and down the street saying Hamas, Hamas. I don't care, because what is this? It is authoritarian overreach and encroachment.
Yeah.
And Chuck Schumer, for the record, should have to resign for not standing up for a constituent. And the whole thing with it is that there's a circle. And as you sacrifice gay and trans people, as you sacrifice immigrants, as you sacrifice somebody who would support Palestine, that circle shrinks. And as you keep making deals with these people, they will find more people. Like what we just saw with the alien enemies bullshit and, this supposed gang. Do you know that they're in a gang? I don't know that they're in a gang. And I'll tell you what, I don't think the fucking government knows they're in a gang either.
No.
They know that they maybe are Venezuelan or maybe they have a Hispanic surname. And that's enough. And guess where they are right now? They are in a hellish El Salvador prison that is the worst on earth. And there is no legal repercussion, no legal representation. And if people listening to this are feeling a little bristly hearing me talk about this, they need to understand authoritarianism gives you three choices. One, you put the armband on and you goose step up and down Main Street and you share in the spoils. Two, you lock the door and you hope that they never knock on your door and you let the world outside go to hell. The third is you make a noise and you threaten destroying yourself. It's a time of sorting. And if you are going to lock the door and hope that everything turns out okay as other doors are being broken down, you deserve what you get at this point. You have capitulated. You have played a role in this. I'm sorry. It's an existential moment of crisis.
Yeah. I mean, we've covered El Salvador. We've covered Nayib Bukele, and we've talked about what he's doing down there. This is the guy who used to go around calling himself the world's coolest dictator. This is the guy who American MAGA types have said, we need an American Bukele. And, this guy posts a smiley face and a whoops after the judge rules against them and says, hey, those planes have to turn around. He's just a complete smartass about it. And
Griff, can I just say, it's bad enough that we're dealing with these motherfuckers. Do they have to be so obnoxious? You know what I mean?
Part of their
yeah.
That's what they do.
Oh, they're awful.
Yeah, it's exactly what I would have expected out of any of them. Him popping off like that was exactly what you expect out of a Jack Posobiec or a Vish Burra or any number of these other motherfuckers that are out there.
But now you got Marco Rubio retweeting it. And you could go back and look at like his long history of work in Central South America and the lobbying contracts and all the consultants and all the people. That's the reason these doors got open. It's part of the reason he got this job. I mean, we can talk about all of that, but it's I mean, we when we talked about El Salvador, Bukele was, I don't know, he was such a joke. And it was such he was this weird crypto guy. And what is this even about? And then 2 years later, he's got these prisons. And how did he get these prisons? Well, he made deals. He made deals with the heads of the gangs. And he essentially gave them safe passage and locked up everyone below the heads and the guys who are running these gangs. And DOJ indicted members of his government for it, and guess who had a problem with that? Guess who thinks they overreached, and that was weaponized government. Well, that's the government we have now. So the number of deals we don't know about, I mean, the amount of money being passed back and forth, God only knows. But at the end of it, you're right. There's these just annoying motherfuckers who send out these tweets like they're kids, like they're just little kids, and they stole your candy.
And I just want to say very quickly on the note, because I think the El Salvador thing is a very, very important point of reference in all of this. I get a lot of questions from people, and they say, how far are these people willing to go? And my answer to them is, look what they've done to other people. We've already talked about the war on terror. Look what they did to people around the world with black site rendition sites, with extra torture, whatever you want to call it. It boomerangs back around. They have already shown what they think about human beings. And anyone who supported that war and still is able to sleep at night without making amends for it, they need to understand that they unleashed a monster. Because those types of actions always come back around to the originating country. Why? Because they learned that they could do that to people around the world and get away with it. And eventually it encroaches back on the population that unleashed it. So if people want to know how bad this can get, go back and look at the war on terror and look at what they did to people, because that was their training ground for this. And everything that we're talking about is the logical evolution of what we've already seen them do to people.
And it's sadly ironic that it turned out to be El Salvador, because if you go back and you look at the history of El Salvador in the 1980s, gee, there was a dirty war down there. And who are we supporting? And look at how it's come back around now. It's like, man, the sins that were committed under the Reagan administration are coming back on us now with this Bukele guy. There's a reason
Griff,
why the population was prepared to put up with this.
But what happens when the people who were behind that are still in charge? This is the reason why you don't elect Joe Biden as your nominee. This is the reason why Chuck Schumer should not be the leader of a Democratic Party. The same people who created this shitstorm are the ones who are now being trusted to fix it. And that is the largest problem in this country, is that all of these missteps, all of this blowback is always going to happen as long as the people who created the problem in the first place are being trusted to fix it.
Yeah. Well, it just makes me think of the article I read yesterday talking about Eric Prince, the old head of Blackwater, who calls himself now, MAGA since forever, and he's lobbying the government for all of this stuff, all these things that they're doing. He wants to privatize it. He wants to take over it. And if you remember, if you're listening and that name Blackwater rings a bell, well, yeah, there was a series of war crimes that were committed by members of Blackwater in Iraq. And yes, those individual people suffered some consequences, but did the people in charge?
Nope.
They're still in
changed
DC.
the name. They changed the name. That's about it. The branding sucked. Blackwater had a real bad reputation, so they changed it to Triple Canopy. And now it's Triple Canopy guys that are keeping Democratic Congress people out of buildings in Washington that Elon Musk's got his people in. Yeah. It's like you told them what they could get away with. You're totally right about that, Jared.
Eric Prince is one of those guys. I don't know if you've ever had this, but it's like you'll be hanging out at a bar and you catch a glimpse at somebody and you're like, I do not need to turn my back on that guy. And, Eric Prince, as long as he doesn't have an official post in the government, I'm like, what the fuck is that guy up to?
Yeah.
And for the record, what he's up to is he is literally trying to create a Wagner Group type mercenary force for the United States government that would operate extra legally. And by the way, because we love the corruption and the grift absolutely in all this, we're not just talking about a mercenary force. We're talking about a huge new carceral state that would probably be over $1 trillion worth of profit. And for the record, what we did to the people who we put in our historically large carceral state, we're in capitalism, baby. It's got to grow. We got to find new people to put in those prisons. There's money to be made. And if you actually take a look at everything that's on the horizon, I don't mean to scare people, but what we're dealing with right now, it's like the difference between your first iPod and what's in your pocket right now. It grows upon each other. It scaffolds. There are many layers to this thing. And for the record, this is all being discussed right now. These meetings are being held. Yeah. There's already the ideological and economic framework for it. Yeah. So the time to stop this is right fucking now. Right. It's not waiting around until Mahmoud Khalil just becomes another number instead of the first person in the midst of all.
Yeah, because he's already another number. We're seeing more deportations. We're seeing that doctor from Brown that just got shipped. We're seeing somebody having to run across the border to Canada because she was worried that ICE was coming for her because of her political opinions. It's not going to stop.
And the way this works, those all of those stories were headlines, front page, New York Times, and they should be. That not saying in any way that they shouldn't be. They're bad. It's notable. We have to talk about it. But what's going to happen? They're going to increase the numbers and the pace, and it's going to move from the top of the page to the bottom to the back of the paper to articles aren't even written about it.
Yeah,
And that's where it's going.
it's not even news anymore.
And for some, it's a knock on the door. It's a hood over your head. You're in a van. You're in El Salvador. That is, quite frankly, for a lot of these people. And for the record, what they are doing with AI right now, they have created an AI in the State Department for these students and for the people on visas and green cards. That type of AI is going to be used on all of our social media at some point. They have created a surveillance state. We all talked about Hungary. What we're dealing with right now is Hungary plus Russia plus China. It's the whole thing. It's a synthesis of them. And my point is, you can get the black bag in the middle of the night, and that could come for you. But the other type of institutional administrative capture, it's universities that are realizing that their federal funding could be yanked and their jobs could be taken away. And you have a bunch of administrators who don't care all that much about due process anyway. In your workplace, you have a lot of people who are going to go ahead and say, we can't risk having the DOJ or the FBI investigating us because we have diversity protocols, right? So what happens is it's just this up and down nature of this thing. So for some people saying the black bag's not coming for me, that's fine. Best of luck to you. But it's coming for your life in every possible way that you can imagine otherwise. This thing does not stop at any certain level. It goes up and down.
Yeah.